Eli Mercer had one hand on the girl's bare ankle and the other already inside his coat. Clara Doyle tried to pull back across the dry summer grass, but her body had nothing left to give. Her feet were raw. There was dirt on her face, blood on one knee, and the kind of fear in her eyes that didn't come from a twisted ankle alone. Ben Carter stood a few yards off with Eli's horse, watching the road, watching the ridge, watching for trouble. Eli didn't look like a kind man kneeling over a young woman in the middle of nowhere. Clara stared at his hand inside that coat and went still. For one awful second, she thought she knew what came next. Eli's eyes lifted to hers. He saw the bruises along her wrist, half hidden beneath the sleeve she kept tugging down. Then he pulled out a small glass bottle. Arnica. That ankle's swollen pretty bad. She flinched when he touched her leg, and he felt it. Not the pain. The fear behind it. He studied the joint, turned it only enough to know what he needed, then let it rest in the grass. "You've pushed it too far already," he said. "If you keep at it, you'll ruin it for good." He uncorked the bottle. "Morning once, night once. Don't do it more than twice a day." That ought to be enough. Clara blinked at him like she'd misheard. Then her lips parted. Only twice a day. Eli froze. Even Ben turned at the sound of it. Eli looked at her again, really looked this time, and what he saw in that young face turned his stomach colder than any river in Montana. She hadn't thought he was talking about medicine. She'd thought he meant her. And that was the moment Eli knew this girl had been living through something far worse than pain. Ben turned sharply toward the road. "Riders," he said. "2 of them. Coming fast." Eli rose in one smooth motion. His hand dropped to the butt of his Colt. Claire tried to stand, failed, and grabbed at the dead log beside her. From the ridge came the first echo of hoofbeat. One of the voices carried on the wind. That'll be her. Eli stepped in front of Claire and reached for his Colt. Was he in time, or already too late? Ben Carter moved first. He swung up into the saddle, pulled Eli's spare horse around, and kept one eye on the riders coming down the ridge. If Eli got this wrong, he'd be carrying her straight into a gunfight. Eli didn't waste a breath. He slid one arm under Clara's shoulders, the other beneath her knees, and lifted her like a man picking up something far too light to be safe. She tensed at once, not from pain alone, from habit. "Easy now," he said. "You can hate me later. Right now, we're leaving. I've carried heavier trouble than you. Don't make me drop you now." They got Claire up on the horse. Then Eli climbed behind her. She bit down hard, trying not to cry out every time the horse jolted her bad ankle. The first rider shouted from the ridge, a man with a mean voice and too much certainty. "You there? That's my wife." Eli didn't turn around. He clicked his tongue, sent the horse forward, Timbo, and answered like he was talking about a missing shovel. "Then maybe you ought to ask yourself why she ran." Then the hoofbeats came harder. If Amos was chasing this hard, Eli figured the truth had to be uglier than a bad marriage. Ben veered off to the right. Drawing one rider wide through a stand of scrub pine, Eli kept Clara low against the saddle and headed for the narrow wash that cut toward his ranch. Clara's breathing turned ragged. Once, when the trail dropped sharp, she grabbed Eli's arm like she thought she might fly apart. "You're safe for this mile," he said. "I won't promise the next one yet." By the time they reached the ranch, the sky had gone copper and long shadows stretched over the pasture. "Lost one in the trees," he said. The other one wasn't brave enough by himself. Eli got Clara down slow. The moment her bare feet touched the yard, she nearly folded. He caught her before she hit the dirt. Ben brought water. Eli set the arnica on the table. What she said next would tell Eli whether he was sheltering a runaway wife or stepping into something much darker. Clara stayed by the door for a moment, then finally said it. "He'll come back." Eli nodded once. "I know." She looked down at her bruised hands. "He owes money in Missoula. He said I'd settle it." The room changed right there. This wasn't a runaway wife anymore. This was a debt. Eli looked up. What exactly did he promise to do with you? Ben knew that name, and he didn't like what came with it. Ben set the bucket down hard. That sounds like Silas Crow. Eli looked at him. You know him not close, Ben said, but I know the name. Runs a place in Missoula. Girls go in. Too many don't come back out. Clara held the towel tight. 2 nights earlier, Amos came home drunk, told her to wash up, and said a wagon was coming after dark. She wasn't going to a job. She was the payment. That was the moment even Ben understood this had stopped being a family matter. Eli didn't speak for a moment. Then he asked one thing. Did he say where Clara nodded? Near the freight sheds outside Missoula. Tomorrow night. Now Eli knew 2 things for certain. Amos would come back, and Missoula was waiting. Ben let out a slow breath. That's bad. That means he's got a time set and money waiting. Eli gave one short nod, which means Amos won't quit. He moved to the window and looked out over the yard. He turned back to Clara. You did right running. For the first time since they found her, her eyes filled but did not break. Nobody's ever told me that before, she said. Ben cleared his throat and reached for his hat. I'll check the barn and the back fence. If Amos comes tonight, I'd rather meet him standing. He stepped out, then leaned back in through the door with the faintest crooked smile. If you're still with me tonight, tell me where you're listening from. Then he tipped his hat and stepped back out into the dark. Before that night was over, blood was going to hit the dirt. Eli almost smiled at that, but only almost. He opened the drawer by the stove, took out extra cartridges, and laid them on the table one by one. Clara watched him. You're staying. Eli looked at her like the question surprised him. Ma'am, he said, your husband made one mistake. He thought he was the only hard man in this valley. Before that night was over, Eli Mercer would have to choose what mattered more, his quiet life or the girl he had just pulled out of the grass. Then, from somewhere beyond the barn, came the sharp crack of a gate slamming open, and all 3 of them knew the next part of the night had already begun. The gate slammed again. Then came the sound every rancher knows and hates after dark, boots running where no friend had business running. Ben was already outside. Eli snatched up the Colt from the table and moved fast, not wild. Clara rose too, but he gave her one hard look that stopped her cold. Upstairs loft, he said, bar the hatch and stay low. She wanted to argue. She ran for the back ladder. Outside, a man shouted Clara's name like he was calling for a stray mule. Amos. Ben met the first man near the horse trough and drove a shoulder into him so hard both of them hit the ground. The second one came through the barn side with a club in his hand and bad ideas in his head. Eli caught him at the door, struck once, then drove him backward into the rail. Amos stayed back near the yard fence. Then Amos raised his revolver and fired once. The shot hit the porch post and sent splinters flying through the dark. Clara heard it from the loft and nearly cried out. Amos kept shouting that Clara was his wife, that nobody had the right to hide what belonged to him. Ben spat blood into the dirt and muttered that marriage sure sounded different when a snake explained it. Then the club man rose again. Ben saw him too late. The blow caught Ben high on the shoulder and sent him hard into the post. When he pushed himself up, blood was running down from under his sleeve. Clara heard it from the loft and grabbed the hatch with both hands so hard her fingers cramped. Eli fired one shot into the dark above Amos's head, not to kill, to make every man in that yard remember the next one would not be polite. It worked. The 2 hired hands broke first. They scrambled for their horses and ran. Amos backed away last, cursing all the while, promising he would return before the next sundown. Then he said to you the one thing Eli could not shake. Crow's already waiting in Missoula. If I don't bring her, he'll come collect another way. Ben sat against the post, breathing hard, one arm hanging useless but not broken. Eli helped him up, then looked toward the house where Clara still hid in the loft. This was bigger than one ranch and one bad husband. If Crow was waiting in Missoula, that was where they had to go. Before dawn, Eli made his choice. He sent Ben ahead to the telegraph office the moment the sky began to pale. "Wire Fort Missoula," he said. "Tell them Crow will be at the freight sheds by morning." Ben grinned through the pain in his shoulder. About time somebody official earned his pay. I'll make it short and mean. Before dawn, Eli Mercer, Ben Carter, and Clara Doyle rode out of that ranch and pointed their horses toward Missoula. The sky was turning pale over the Bitterroot Valley when they reached the freight sheds outside town. Silas Crow was there. Just like Amos said, Ben took one of Crow's men hard by the loading rail and held him there with one good arm and sheer stubbornness. Eli went straight through Amos. Clara saw Crow reach for a small ledger near the wagon bench, and in that instant she understood what mattered most. Not revenge, proof. She snatched the book and stumbled back. Favoring the bad ankle, Crow lunged after her. Clara did not run far. She hurled the ledger out into the open dirt between the wagons and shouted for every man there to hear. "This is what he owes you all." Amos turned, Crow turned, and Eli stopped them cold. By then the riders from Fort Missoula were already coming in from the road to the freight sheds, just as Eli had hoped. One of them dismounted, picked up the ledger, and opened it right there. The book told the rest. Names, payments, destinations. Lies written neat as Sunday scripture. Not long after, Crow was in irons. Amos was on his knees in the dirt, shouting that Clara belonged to him. She looked at him one last time and answered with the calm of a soul that had finally stepped out of a long, dark room. No, she didn't. But the part Clara remembered most was not the fighting. It was that Eli asked nothing from her once the danger was gone. That evening, back at the ranch, Ben sat on the porch with coffee and a bruised shoulder, grinning like a man pleased to still be breathing. Clara stood near the fence, watching the last of the sun turn the pasture gold. Eli came beside her, quiet as ever. Maybe that was the lesson. Cruel men confuse love with ownership. Better men know strength means protection. And a wounded life is not a finished life. A few days later, Clara came back to the porch with a small sack of flower seeds and asked if there was room beside the house. Eli looked at the ground, then at her. "This land don't care who you were," he said, "only who you become." Then he told her there was room. That was all. Sometimes that's more than enough. Now tell me this. What would you have done in Eli's place? And do you believe a person can truly begin again after being treated like they never mattered at all? If this story stayed with you, please like the video, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. This story was gathered and retold, with a few details shaped to bring out the lesson, the feeling, and the value in it. The images are AI-assisted illustrations used to deepen the mood of the story. And if this one was not for you, get some rest and take care of yourself. But if it was, stay close. There are more old stories worth telling.